Just the sheer number of announcements that have come out of China, out of places like Zimbabwe, Australia, those tons haven't actually made it to the market, but they've impacted people's perception of how many tons potentially has entered the market.
So, hello, welcome to the one-to-one Global Online Critical Materials event. Today I'm here with Cameron Perks, Principal Analyst at Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, to talk about lithium. So, Cameron, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And so, lithium has had quite an exciting ride over the past year. Looking at the year to come, what are your thoughts in regard to future lithium supply and demand and pricing?
Yeah, it's probably the question on everybody's mind. 2023, the beginning of 2023, when prices softened, I don't think this was really a surprise to us. So we were forecasting a softening in prices for lithium, but never to the point where they've gone to today. I think the surprising thing for many has been the psychological aspect of 2023. The pricing that we've seen in China has really been, its trajectory has really been exacerbated by a few events. So CATL's 200,000 RMB price pass-through mechanism, just the sheer number of announcements that have come out of China, out of places like Zimbabwe, Australia, those tons haven't actually made it to the market, but they've impacted people's perception of how many tons potentially has entered the market. On the other hand, there has been a softening in demand, but not as much as many have said. I think that the underlying fundamentals in terms of demand, and it's not just me thinking this, but the data suggests that the underlying demand is still strong, and so for the rest of 2023, we should see strengthening prices on the back of that demand and the fact that supply has not actually responded as fast as what might it seem. So I mentioned the context and the softening and that fall in prices because I don't think that there's enough time now for prices to reach all-time highs in 2023 before what we see as, again, seasonal softness in 2024. So it's going to be quite cyclical, and I think that mining investors are going to be quite used to that in a way. It presents opportunities. It's not necessarily a bad thing. So there's probably a lot more to talk about, but that's it in a nutshell. Okay.
So, we've seen how the impact of geopolitics on various metals markets. How have global events impacted the lithium markets, and are there specific kind of things at play that investors or miners should be looking out for?
Geopolitics has played a huge role, and it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. The IRA has made a huge impact, and there has been speculation, and I think there's still reason to think that it may not impact mining so much in that the IRA is focused on manufacturing, so refining of lithium and opportunities there for direct investment from the US government is there, but it's not necessarily focused on the mining side. But now we're seeing supply chain security become a real part of conversation that wasn't there even just 6 months ago. It wasn't taken so seriously. Bifurcation of markets, or Ford completely wanting to bypass lithium conversion in China. Just yesterday announcing that big deal with Albemarle, SQM, and Livent and others. So it's definitely real and something that's material for investors and creates maybe an opportunity for a thematic investment, or it's when we think of North American supply chains, we think of European supply chains, and we might think of the Chinese supply chain, and how that all plays out, I don't know. But it's certainly been important. The geopolitics, China has maybe not a stranglehold on lithium, but in terms of the conversion capacity and the skills and understanding they have in China, they really are dominant in the conversion, the downstream lithium market. So getting away from that dominance is something that investors and governments are looking to do. How that plays out from an investment point of view, I don't know, but that's certainly a theme. It's a big, strong trend.
Yeah, certainly this de-globalization, as people are calling it, and kind of regionalizing of supply chains.
Although I think it might be temporary. I don't think it's going to be long-term 2 markets, 2 supply chains, or 3 supply chains. I think eventually it will even out.
Interesting. So looking at kind of popular mining locations for lithium, so the Lithium Triangle has always been important. It counts for about 60% of known reserves or so. How do you see Chile's announcement last month affecting lithium in the near term? And does Chile's new lithium program change anything?
I don't think it changes much, actually. And for us, and our forecasting point of view, we weren't really forecasting a lot of expansion to come out of Chile because there was really limited greenfield projects being developed there. For the incumbents, it does change a lot in terms of their requirement around DLE. So maybe not so much the national strategy as it relates to nationalization, as people are calling it. It's not necessarily nationalization. It's more of a negotiation from the government to retain some control over those operations. I don't think that in itself is a bad thing or limiting to expansions in those regions. I think the DLE component and that requirement around that will be just difficult. I don't think, again, not insurmountable, but difficult to comply with. So I see some issues there. Okay.
And so we've seen kind of countries like Canada and Australia trying to kind of grow their lithium mining capacity. Is there pushback in these places against further mining and
I don't think in Canada that there's a pushback. I think it's a pretty strong mining jurisdiction, and same with Australia. There's a lot of open land, sparse population, and not really any competition with agricultural uses, which I think does become a problem, or encroaching on urban populations. So I think that's a natural place to have a lot of mining. For Canada, it's a natural place for the US to receive feedstock for conversion facilities that are domestic. Australia now, with that relationship that's been announced between Biden, Albanese, essentially with the intention that Australia would become a domestic source for US lithium. That's really exciting for Australians, and I think that it does kill a couple of birds with a stone, and it allows the US to have a domestic source of lithium offshore and avoid NIMBYism, which is there in the US, although some would argue that it's not about people that are NIMBYs, it's more about a lack of education that mining can be done sustainably in a transparent way, but that's not necessarily the narrative, and I think that there's a lot to overcome. I think they could be overcome, but as a quick solution, the involvement of the US with Australia and Canada navigates that problem quite nicely.
Okay, great. And my last question was just looking at the impact of changing battery chemistries, or how do the different chemistries impact lithium supply, demand, and the general outlook?
Yeah, I think lithium prices impact lithium efficiency and density in the cathode, and I think that's a big factor in lithium demand, more so than, say, the mix of cathodes that consumers or that OEMs desire. Whether it's LFP or high nickel, lithium is still going to be used. If we're talking about competitive cathodes, and so potentially sodium ion, I don't think those are going to make a big impact, if any, in the short to medium term. Still more or less a laboratory experiment. In the long term, sodium ion will make some impact, particularly in stationary storage. But in terms of it being a competitor, it's not too serious for lithium. And lithium demand itself is very much safe.
Okay. All right, sounds great. Well, certainly a lot to kind of keep our eye on. Cameron, thanks for joining me here today.
Thank you.